I'm not where I'm supposed to be.
Hey, I'm
Going
Danielle
in
Davies, and you're
circles,
listening to Roar,
going
a
in
show that
circles.
amplifies the voices of
I
women
should
breaking
get
barriers,
away
leading
from
change,
here.
and making real
There's a
impact.
better
Keep
place
listening
for
for
me,
bold ideas and stories that
better
inspire
place for
you
me.
to find your voice
Trying to
and
play
make
my
some noise.
symphony.
Hi,
There's
everybody.
so
Today is our second episode of Roar, and today we'll be talking to Anna Hall, who is the founder of the Embody app. I got to meet Anna at a FemTech summit this past spring, and she is one of the first people that I was thinking of when I thought of doing a podcast. The Embody app is a completely private period tracker. It's private by default, and we're going to talk about why that's actually so important, the story behind its development, and how Anna got involved with the female healthcare space to begin with. So, welcome, Anna.
Hi, it's so good to be here. Danielle and I kind of hit it off at the conference, and when she said she was starting a podcast, I was thrilled to be able to be on it.
Yeah, I'm very excited that you're here. So I just want to start off by, can you tell us exactly what Embody is and with that, why it's so important?
Sure. So Embody is a menstrual wellness app. You could call it a period tracker. That's what we do on the most basic level, but we're more than that. Our biggest differentiator, though, is that we are private by default. And we can go into what exactly that means now or talk about it in a little bit.
Yeah, I want to talk about it because I actually just talked to a friend prior to calling you, and I was telling her who I was talking to today, and we kind of paused because she doesn't track her period like that, and then I explained to it, but I know it because we're hearing it from you. Why exactly is this so important?
Yeah, so
The privacy.
really, really important to have a private period tracker because unfortunately, in states like mine, there are restrictive abortion bans in place, and that makes the women who use period trackers in those states, that data is susceptible to being subpoenaed by law enforcement or potentially used in the court of law if there is a case of suspected abortion. Um, that's like the big scary consequence that's out there. And this kind of stuff is unfortunately happening. People will find data, subpoena data in, say, Facebook Messenger and prosecute based on that data. And you know, we deserve better than that. We deserve to have a safe space to put our most private information so that it's not shared with anyone we don't want it shared with. And that includes, selling the data to third parties, which is unfortunately what a lot of period trackers do today.
I was going to say, do they actually do that? And is there a way besides what you've done to avoid that happening? Or are you at threat of a lawsuit if something like that, if the government comes to you and says that they want it, are you at risk of being shut down if you don't provide that information? I'm just not sure how that works.
Sure, like any type of subpoena, it is you are required to hand the data over if you have access to it, right? And this is different if you live in different countries. And also, there are a lot of peer trackers that say, of course, we won't share that data. But when it comes down to it, if you look at the privacy policies, they have to. Um,
Oh, I was just going to say, but for you guys, for the Embody app, that's not even possible.
It's not possible. So what we do is we're offline first, meaning that your data stays on your phone. It does not touch the cloud without your explicit permission. That's not even an option for it to touch the cloud right now. So it's stored locally on your device. It's encrypted on your device. So even locally, it's safe. And then also in the next month, I'm really excited, we're open sourcing. So you don't have to trust that we're delivering on these privacy promises. People who are tech savvy enough can go in, look at the code, and know that we're keeping our privacy promises.
And Anna, as you're describing it, you obviously sound like you know what you're talking about. And of course you do because of this, but you're not an experienced app developer. This isn't like, you don't have like a long string of apps that you've developed. It's this. Can you tell me what led up to this for you? Because this isn't your career history.
Right. My career history is I was a public school special education teacher in both the Atlanta area and the Bay Area, south of San Francisco, for about 10 years. So education is obviously, I'm very passionate about it. Menstrual health education, I'm very passionate about. So that's a big component. I was diagnosed at 31 with PMDD, and that is a premenstrual disorder. So I kind of live by my cycle and my schedule. And so that's something I'm just keenly aware of. I was a period tracker power user. I think I had like 5 period trackers on my phone. I don't really like any of them. Um, but I said Bay Area. My partner has been in the startup game since 2011. And if you ask any partner of a startup founder, you are too. Kind of like I've been in the shadows helping make big decisions and seeing the startup game play out for years and years as I was teaching and had insurance and kind of was the stable one. And so with this PMDD diagnosis, I had children too. And then Roe was overturned. And then I live in Atlanta, Georgia. We had a heartbeat trigger law. So that meant as soon as Roe was overturned, a 6-week abortion ban was in place. I feel deeply uncomfortable about that being of reproductive age. And then I also have a daughter, and I feel uncomfortable raising her somewhere where, worst case scenario, some big decision needed to be made, we would have to go get care in a different state. I just think that's ludicrous. It's dangerous. We all, a lot of us feel this way, right? So,
Yeah.
okay, so the education, the PMDD, the knowledge of the startup world and the connections there, and the Roe v. Wade being overturned in the South, all those things, I think combined brought me to creating Embody. I was out to dinner with my husband on our 10th anniversary, and I was just fuming because Roe had just been overturned. I was about to start my period, and I couldn't use a tracker because I was like, they're just selling my data and it's not safe in this app. And that's when I had that little aha moment. I can make this happen. We deserve more than pen and paper, which all the security experts were like, oh, we should go back to pen and paper. I think that's bullshit. And I saw a clear path forward. And I had access and friends who are expert cryptographers. So that's where the security chops come in. I feel like in this role, though my background is not in tech, I'm keenly aware of how startups function, and I know how to collect the good people to make this happen. So I jumped on that
And
opportunity.
you definitely have. I've met some of them, and they're as wonderful as you are. And I just want to go back because there's, well, two things that you said in there. First, do you think that had Roe not been overturned, you would have come to this aha moment just because of the privacy aspect anyway? Or do you think that that was like the nail in the coffin where you're like, enough is enough?
I really think it maybe wouldn't have that. I think that was the nail in the coffin, and enough was enough. I think a lot of us felt this way, like there was something we had to do. And so a lot of us were sitting there thinking, oh, what can I do? This isn't okay. What can I do? And that's when I asked myself that question, I saw that this is something that I could do.
And you know what? That's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you. And that's one of the reasons I'm doing this podcast is because I think what I've seen, and I'm sure you've seen this too, is so many women are facing a problem. And rather than saying, oh my gosh, this is a problem, what are we going to do? And just kind of
Yeah.
waiting for a solution. It's single women. And then, obviously we're creating teams and we're working with other women and we're collaborating. There's such a great community, but it's often starting because of the spark of one person. And that spark is often coming because we're having something pushed against us. We're pushing back, basically. The other
Yep.
thing I wanted to mention, you talked about your daughter, is the fact, do you think you would feel so strongly in terms of advocacy? And I asked this of my guest last week too. I'm just curious, because you have a daughter, do you think this advocacy, because it is advocacy, right? You're creating something, but you are advocating for something, and it's privacy and choice in your reproductive health.
Right.
Do you think that you would have been propelled along those same lines without being a mom to a
Hmm.
girl?
That is such a good question. I don't know. I really think like I'm naturally that like advocacy is something that I grew up around, and it was kind of like part of who I was already in the disability world. So maybe, but I think being a mother, I think and you learn this even without being a mother, but at some point you're like, oh, I'm the one. I need to step up and do the things that are needed. And I think motherhood and having a daughter, I also have a son, kind of like egged it on. Like I just felt overprotective. And I'm like, well, I'm a parent. I'm supposed to be making wise choices for my family's safety. And this is, this is a big one, especially as she approaches monarchy and becoming a woman in the South.
Yeah, yes, exactly. And I think that, like you said, you don't have to be a mom to figure these things out. But sometimes, if you are a mom, I think especially of girls right now, boys too. I have a boy and a girl, so I'm weighing it out in my head. But basically, as a mom of a girl, you feel like some things might be acceptable to you that aren't really acceptable, but you'll suck it up because you're
Totally.
like, okay, well, this is just the way that it is. But when it comes to your daughter, you're so fiercely protective that you will change the world if you have to, or do your best to do that.
Yeah, it's just like at some point it becomes unacceptable for your daughter to have fewer rights than you had growing up. Like that's just unacceptable. So you have to do something.
It shouldn't even have to be said, but yes,
Oh,
that's correct.
yeah,
So let's talk more about the app itself, because like you said at the beginning, and I introduced it as a period tracker, because that is initially what I thought of it as also. And full disclosure, I was a beta user on this and I loved it, and I do still love it, but I really loved being a beta user and getting to kind of see it in its earlier stages. But it's so much more than that. It really talks to you about your cycle. It explains where you are in your cycle. It explains what you might be feeling. And I think it really kind of shines a light on things that we've steered clear of, or I certainly didn't hear this when I was growing up. So could you talk a little bit about what inspired you to do that and what the app actually does?
absolutely. So really the tool itself is a period tracker, a way for you to keep up with your cycle, learn about your body. But we wanted to take it a step further because a lot of people, I mean, I was 31 when I learned that there were 4 phases of my cycle. We're not explicitly taught this. And like, it's really life-changing information. I used to think I was just like a really inconsistent person. No, I am just a very cyclical person, as a lot of menstruators are, right? Just biologically. Um, and so it's a huge unlock. When I got the PMDD diagnosis, I like to say, like, I, I think people with typical cycles, and which there are very few people with typical cycles, I'll just say, but they experience the phases and like the symptoms that come with each phase of your cycle, right? So you have your menstrual phase where you're bleeding, you might feel tired. We call that our winter. We kind of turn inward. It's actually a really good time for like introspection and big decision making because you're kind of all the little stuff falls away and you're thinking about the most important things. And then we have the follicular phase, which we refer to as the spring. So this is kind of where you're really good at planning, your energy returns, you're pretty steady. And then ovulation hits, we call that our summer, you're flirtatious. A lot of people experience a boost in energy and then maybe a drop right after they ovulate. Um,
Okay.
that's good to plan for. It might be a good time to like have a speaking engagement or go out with friends or plan a trip. And then you have the luteal phase, the fall, where you begin to turn inward again. It's a really good time for deep writing, maybe less to plan on less social things. Anyways, it's just a huge life hack, right? And some people refer to this as cycle syncing. So kind of like practices or decisions based on how you might feel at a different time in your cycle. So I was new to all this at 31. PMDD is like those symptoms, but heightened, right? Especially in a longer luteal phase leading up to your period. So I began working with different experts, like my gynecologist, a nutritionist who
Okay.
is just fantastic. And she told me how I can eat to alleviate unwanted symptoms throughout the month. And I can't tell you, like, this stuff works. Um, and her name's Mandy Rother. She is contributing content to the app for our paid version coming out soon. And she is just fantastic. She also has PMDD. She's a mother. and just a very wise woman, and was really the first one to kind of bring me into this cycle syncing world. Um, so it's a lot more than just what symptoms do I have today, right? I feel like right now our app, so it's phase based. So whatever phase you're in, that's the color you'll see in the background of the app. We also have a widget, which is really handy. It tells you what day you're on, what phase you're in, and it's the color of the phase you're in. And again, we use that like seasonal language. Um,
And I
so
love that too, because it's so much more relatable than what the phases are really called, which is valuable information. I mean, we should certainly know, but in terms of just how you think about it and kind of your comfort level with it, I feel like the phases really help you spell it out.
yeah,
And also, don't feel alone because I'm pretty sure that I found out about the phases. I mean, I knew two of the phases, but I didn't know the other two phases. And I'm pretty sure I found them out while using the app. So,
right.
which
I
means
know.
it's brand new to me and I'm significantly older. So,
Yes.
so
And
thank you for sharing.
I want people to know this earlier than we did, right? I think it's really impactful and helpful. And I'm not saying so everyone doesn't have a typical cycle, but it's really helpful to know what is the norm and maybe how you differ. And then what can you do to capitalize on how you're feeling at this time, and then support how you're feeling when maybe you have unwanted symptoms and things that you're struggling with. So I like to think of our app as like a gentle, wise friend who kind of tells you what you might be feeling today and how you can work with that.
Well, and I think, we talked about younger, our daughters, but in terms of users, especially as you're just coming into a menstrual cycle, it's got to be helpful to young kids who are just starting off so that they can know, like, hey, this is not abnormal. It's not, this isn't, especially teenagers who are going through so many hormonal issues that just in their growth and development, but to know like, hey, I'm at this point of the cycle. I think kids are so much more educated today, and showing them something like this could be immensely helpful. Do you think, I mean, do you have an age range for your typical user? And I'm asking that not just for the young set, but also for people managing the end of their reproductive cycles. So, people in perimenopause or menopause, does it cross all age ranges or is it specifically for a certain age range?
So a lot of period trackers and period apps focus on fertility and reproductive age. And while most of our users are of that age, 25 to 35, um, we're seeing some really interesting things happening outside of that range. Specifically, we've had a lot of parents who are experiencing perimenopause come to us and say, I don't have resources. I grew up with a period tracker, but it doesn't work for me anymore. And I have a daughter in my house, and I don't feel comfortable with her downloading period trackers that might misuse her data. So it's this interesting, like, two-person household thing going on. There's not enough support for people in perimenopause, and I'm reaching that age. And so what Embody is doing is we're listening to that, we're noticing that gap, and we're starting to gather experts in the area of perimenopause. We have a naturopathic doctor named Amanda Tracy who's going to be sharing exclusive content with the app.
I'm all
The
excited.
perimenopause specialist, she's fantastic. And then I've had neighbors who say, Anna, is your app ready? Because my daughter, she just started and I'm not comfortable with any other apps right now. And I'm just so thankful that I get to share Embody with them. And I'm going to use this with my daughter one day. I think about this as really a helpful tool and also a safe one. So I'm really, really excited about kind of the outside edge of our typical reproductive years.
Yeah, I'm excited about that too. Well, especially because I'm in the outside edge. And so it will be user friendly for me, but also with a teenage daughter, you can envision years, decades ahead for her where she can access this information. And it's almost like you start off saying it's a period tracker, but by the end of the conversation, the period tracking is almost like the least of it, even though obviously it's built on that. But I think the information that it's giving you is really unique. And feels very holistic and very feminine. It almost reminds me of like the good parts of the red tent. Did you ever read
Yeah.
that book?
Yes.
Just the idea of supporting women as they're going through a cycle. And I like that aspect of it. And so I want to ask you now just about the space in general. So you weren't, well, you were, you did know a lot about privacy prior because of your partner and the experience in there. But now that you're so actively a part of that space on your own, what are you envisioning for the future of period tracking and reproductive health technologies in terms of data privacy? Do you think we're going to start to see other people go this route? I mean, are you the first ones to do it? You're the first ones I had heard of, but will there be other ways? And are there other ways to keep things private?
Yeah, so we're not necessarily the first, but I will say it's very difficult to hold both your privacy ideals and grow as a company because they can often be at odds. And so we are very committed to the privacy piece. We think it's our biggest differentiator. Um, and what's really unusual about us and other companies that are privacy minded is that we begin offline. So what I mean by that is a lot of apps you download, you might, you create a login, you have a name, you use the app. If they're privacy minded, maybe they'll give you an option to opt out of data collection or even opt out of any type of data interaction online, right? But what we're doing is we're offering people, we're offline first, and we offer people to opt in eventually. So it's just like a very different mode of functioning in the tech world. And I do think that this is going to become increasingly important. There have been a lot of studies that people are ready to pay for privacy, and we're going to be testing that theory pretty soon here. What we're doing at Embody is right now we have the free period tracker that's offline first. We don't have any of your data because it's only on your phone. Pretty soon, what's tricky with that though, is if you change phones, your data is gone. And so,
Okay.
so it's not super easy. And the history of your data is incredibly important. So what we're building now and what we're offering in the next couple months is for people to opt in to encrypted backup. And we're working with experts and security to make sure that it is as secure as possible. And you can pay to have that data backed up safely.
And so does that change? Yeah, I was going to say, so does that change it? Does it become less private or I mean, it's still encrypted, but
Yeah.
it's now somewhere.
Yes, correct. But it's again, it's an opt-in. And it's almost like we have to
Right.
do this type of security education as we go, right? Because so much of the way we interact with our phones and interact with our computers is immediate connection, right? And so for somebody to say, okay, we're going to wait and get your permission to make sure you opt into this connectivity is very different. So
Definitely. And it's interesting too, because, and with the advent of phones, the advent of computers, we all just were so quick to be like, ah, and, now you'll say, stop talking, your phone's listening. And, I'm clearly not the only one who might look up anthropology candles and next thing you know, they're like an ad on my phone. So
totally.
it's interesting that we're having to kind of now backpedal our way out of this. It's too bad they didn't think of this at the onset. And I don't think people at the time were thinking about what a breach of privacy meant because you're like, oh, sure, somebody can mail me something. You didn't realize the levels of privacy breach that are
Right.
out there.
So it's our job is to choose where our own personal line is and to pull back in the places that matter the most to us, right? And I think menstrual health, especially if you're a parent or if you live in a state like mine, is a really fantastic way to start and embodies an easy way to do it. One of the other biggest things that we noticed when we started Embody was there is not a really safe place for women to come together online and discuss the issues that are really affecting them without fear of retribution. Um, so like discussing, oh, I'm really struggling with this birth control method. Are there other options? Or hey, I'm finding myself in a really unfortunate position and I'm looking for options for abortion care. Nobody's going to put that on a forum. It's
On
not
Facebook, right?
right. There's not a safe space. And a lot of people feel really uncomfortable sharing any type of private information like that. Periods are still taboo. So where do women connect was a big question I had when I first started Embody. Um, you know, it's not Facebook, it's not Discord, um, it's not exactly TikTok. It's, where are we connecting with each other online that feels safe? And so something we're really excited about doing with Embody is we're going to be expanding. We know that people who have health apps like to be able to have a social component. So how do we do that safely? How do we create a safe space for women to connect with each other, learn from each other? Because that's what we do. We learn from each other in small, trusted groups, right? So what we're working towards, and this is like our big term goal, is creating a decentralized social network within the app. And this gets a little techy too. But what it is it's a series of servers instead of one central server where data exists so that it is less searchable, it is more private, and it is safer for women to connect about these issues that we need to talk to each other about online.
I'm so excited you're saying this because obviously the people listening here don't know that, what the Embody beta group was like, but there was a little bit of a social component and a separate, we could interact on it on WhatsApp. And it's funny because, we're supposed to be in there to offer feedback, but many times the conversation has veered completely off of that. And so, people will be talking about, well, what period cup do you use? Or, and, we've had to say, oh, sorry, we're having this conversation that has nothing to do with the app, but has everything to do with what we're experiencing with our periods. And is that okay that we keep going? And you've been so gracious about it, but I'm excited that you've taken that kind of that feedback, that organic feedback, and you're going forward with it. And that's one of the questions that I wanted to ask you. How has feedback from users shaped the development of the app? And is there anything else coming? I mean, you've actually told me already now two things coming down the pike. So we've got kind of the online, like the community aspect, and then there's also the paid version. Is there anything else? Oh, and the perimenopause stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot happening.
There is a lot happening. Has this is this all based on feedback, or has
Yeah.
it been planned from the beginning?
Some of it's been planned from the beginning, but a lot of it has been based on feedback. So beyond having a private period tracker, I was thinking about like partner sharing from the beginning, and that's something we're still looking at too, like being able to tell your partner or to show your partner like what phase you're in. That's something we're thinking about and users are excited about. We might get there. But a lot of what we're building now is come explicitly from users and a lot of people in the beta test group as well. So it was really important to us to build something that people actually wanted. And so that's why we formed this beta group and we call it the Embody Insiders. Anybody is welcome to join. And I think
And it's
that,
awesome. It's awesome.
yeah, I really think the insiders
I hope it stays up after,
yeah, that's the plan. But really, we were very intentional to say we are gonna, have a prototype and then get feedback and then build on what users are wanting. And we ended up doing a massive redesign. I think you saw the older one, right?
Yep. I
We
mean,
did a
and now
massive
it's
redesign.
I liked it fine before. It was fine because you didn't know any better, but now it's just
Yeah,
so beautiful. And when you talk about the phases, they're different colors, and it kind of lets you know at the outset kind of what to anticipate. I also want to say I love the idea of the partner sharing. And obviously that's something you would opt in about. It's not like you'd have some
absolutely. Yes, you have to be
jerky
very careful
jerky
with that.
husband holding something against you,
That's
but
right.
instead
That's
you'd
why we haven't started building it yet, is because we have to be very thoughtful about
You
that really.
do, yes, absolutely. But I was thinking in terms of, positive relationships, how many times you want to say, "Hey, read this. Is this not describing me? I just had my human design. Somebody did my
Oh
human
yeah.
design." And I said to my husband, "You have to read this." Like, and likewise, I'm like, I need to know the exact minute you were born so I can get yours for you and we can It's just, it's
Yeah.
just interesting insights. And of course, this is very science-based, so it's particularly useful. I think they're great ideas. Have there been any other things that you've done that are coming down the pike, or that you've done that you can think of that were user response generated?
Yeah, so a lot of people, we kept hearing from people, I want to know more about the phases. Obviously, that's where we focus a lot. And I want to have access to people who can help me with my phases and with my symptoms. And so our paid version is going to look a lot like, I don't know if anyone here is familiar with Calm app, where you
Yeah.
get a trial and then you get content from different experts, and they're all meditations. But what we're going to be offering, and I call these the Embody experts. So for example, Mandy Rother, my former nutritionist, is submitting recipes and ways to eat out for each phase, those type of pieces of content. We also have workout videos from personal trainers who are
Wow.
that are tailored to different phases of the cycle. People who are experts on work and how to work for each phase of your cycle. And then mantras and meditations for each phase of your cycle as well. So that's really exciting. That's coming, and that is directly from ideas that users have had in the past. So
That's really fun.
I'm excited.
That's because it's like sometimes so before I used Embody, I used my Fitbit, my period track. I literally don't even have a Fitbit anymore, but I still have the app, so I would just track my period there, and it was just you go in, you hit your dots, you maybe say your mood, and you're done. There's nothing there. I love the idea of Embody being kind of beefy and like making you want to stay and interact in a really positive way, and it just being so woman centric. I love it.
There's a lot to learn. I mean, I'm still learning ways to support my symptoms and ways to live as a woman. Okay, I gotta share my favorite kind of like mind shift that owning a fully female company too has allowed me to explore is the idea of a cyclical work month instead of a work week. Because we always
Okay.
like, you work 40 hours a week, it's full time. We don't really function like that because our weeks are so different in our cycles. And so thinking about and planning ahead, I know I'm not going to be feeling my best. Maybe I'll do like a 25. It's hard to plan ahead, but it ends up looking like maybe a 25-hour work week if you have the option, or working at different times of day that make you feel better. And then when you feel supercharged, when you're ovulating, you can get in a 50-hour work week, or, just thinking about work differently as a cyclical work month as opposed to a work week has been such a cool mental shift for me. And so
Yes.
helpful for somebody with PMDD, honestly.
Well, it's interesting because the world that we live in the United States of America was not built around how women do anything. It was built around men, and the women stayed home and took care of the men. And that's just the nature of the way our country was formed and founded. And so, everything is built upon this, and we can back off and we can change things, and we can hopefully come from really progressive parents who maybe modeled that for us. But in terms of like a culture, we still have those, typical 40-hour work week, or really a
Yeah.
50-hour work week, and it starts really early and it late ends at night. And even our schools go
Yes.
into this. And
As a
and so
teacher,
it's
I'm like, wow, this is a very different way to think because it was so rigid.
Yes, and it is such an interesting way to think, especially, I work for myself and you run your company, but it's interesting because once you know it, it's fun to think about how you can implement that for yourself and for the people
Yeah.
around you.
Yeah.
So that's going to be exciting. When will the paid app be available?
So we're hoping it will be available by end of March for sure.
Okay,
But we're
okay.
hoping to get it out sooner.
So that's
So
March 2025. So we're not that far.
we're not that far.
Okay. And so, and one, wait, I have one more question. So, and this kind of backs up to the idea of advocacy. And I asked this, I think this is going to be like the question I ask everybody. But, sometimes stepping into a space that's as charged as just being a woman can be a little bit scary, or intimidating, or you're made to feel that it's scary and intimidating. So, do you have any advice for people who are wanting to step up in their own way? We all have our different skill sets, and maybe you're outside with a bullhorn, maybe you're inside developing an app, maybe you're a comedian. Do you have any advice for people who want to step into this space but are a little bit fearful about the blowback?
Absolutely. I will say, first of all, like the blowback is real. It, creates, I don't want people to,
Don't beat
I
around the bush.
yeah,
Like,
toxic
it's real.
positivity here is not helpful for female founders and women in FemTech or beyond. We know that. I think it was men who found FemTech companies raise 50% more capital than women who run FemTech companies. Wild.
Yeah.
We know that it's a real challenge, but actually the FemTech conference that we went to, I think I stood up and I asked this panel of founders, like, what percent of what you do is external validation and what percent is internal? And they were like, oh, 100% internal.
I remember you asking that. Yeah.
And then one of the founders said, listen to your users. And honestly, that made me nod my head quickly then, even because of people like you and other people who are using the app that are finding value in it. And that is such validation for what you're doing. And I want to say, I was just telling Danielle before we started this, we've grown from about 750 users to 10,000 in the last 2 weeks, which is just mind
Which is
blowing.
crazy. That's crazy.
It's again that validation that what you're creating is powerful and meaningful despite the way that we're typically funded. And then the other thing I've learned as a woman in this space is it's not about pushing hard. It's about knowing your value and going at your own pace. So again, like the cyclical work month versus the 40-hour work week. You're not a 20-year-old male startup founder without any ties to reality. And honestly, I think that that's a big advantage.
It's like you're going to say ties to something, and you just said ties to reality. Sorry.
But I think, really looking in at what you value and taking care of yourself, and listening to yourself and reminding yourself that what you're building is important. I have to do that on a daily basis to keep going. And I think that it's just essential.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And now tell us, like, what do you need from users? Like, what can we do to help support you?
I think just tell people about it. A lot of people, it's 1 in 3 women in the United States use a period tracker, which is wild. Yes. And a lot of them are not aware of the risk of keeping their private data in these apps that exist now. So just letting people know, hey, there's a safer way, and sharing Embody with them is the most
And
helpful thing.
and you are still looking, you're still open to beta, or to, the Embody, the
Insiders.
WhatsApp group? Yes,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
Embody.
absolutely. If you want to join the Embody Insiders, we'd love to have you. In this group, like Danielle was saying, you get sneak peeks of new features. You hear about big news first. And it's been a really lovely place to connect with other people about all things menstruation and being a woman or a person with a cycle.
Yeah, it has been really nice. I like it. It was actually quite a surprise because I thought, I think people think, oh, they're looking at something, they're getting updates. It's, you're just on the receiving end. but it's really been a very interactive space and a very supportive space. So well done. And that's not even the app. So well done. And what I'll do at the end of this in the show notes is I'll put all your social media handles so people can follow you. They can download the app. If I can, I'll try to include a picture, though I don't know that my video editing savvy is going to allow that, but I will try to also show a picture of what the app looks like from, a user standpoint. And yeah, that should be it. But is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wanted to share?
No, your questions were wonderful. And a lot of them I haven't been asked before, so I really appreciate it. And I can't wait to listen to future podcasts.
Oh, thank you so much. Okay, well, have a great day. Keep up the great work. I bet if somebody calls you next week, you're going to be up to like 20,000 users. So take a breather when you need one.
Yes, coming up for air.
Yeah, exactly. Anna, thank
Yes,
you so much. I really appreciate it.
likewise.
Have a
Bye.
great day. Bye-bye.